Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and today I'm at the wheel of one of the greatest cars of the 1990s, certainly an iconic vehicle of the decade. Yes, it's a BMW E36, but not a straight six, not an M3. This is more of what the connoisseur may choose to go for. This is a 318 IS. This is the secret good one. Now, this car is currently for sale at Stone Cold Classics at Rootham in Kent. If you're interested in this particular car and I haven't bought it already, then head down to the website in the link below. Now, if you're interested in reviews of interesting and unusual cars like this, then do please hit the like and subscribe buttons before we go any further, because that makes a massive difference to the channel. Now, let's crack on with the review.
Proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the Furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk.
So here we have the third generation 3 Series, the car that finally replaced the E30 in 1990, and it actually ran for 10 years until 2000. So before that we had the E21, the E30, and BMW knew this was going to be a massively difficult act to follow, because the E30 had been a real halo car of the yuppie generation. It was the car that really gave BMW its brand image throughout the 80s. So they started working on this thing back in 1981. And the design came from a couple of pretty well-known designers, Boyka Boya and Pinky Lau. And Pinky, he's also responsible for the Porsche Boxster and the 996 911. So yeah, he's got some pretty good car designing credentials. And the design focus of the E36 moved away from BMW's traditional shark nose, edgy, angular design to this new, more aerodynamic shape that will perform better in the wind tunnel, get better MPG, and the kind of stuff that people are really starting to focus on. To that end, the entire front end is far more rounded, more flowing, and that follows through into the general shape of the car all over. Now, BMW really did make the most of this platform. They did all kinds of variations on it. There was the 4-door saloon, which I'm sure you know and love. There was a 5-door estate. There was a 2-door convertible. There was a compact hatchback. There was even the 4-door Bauer convertible conversion. And of course there was this, the 2-door coupe, which in my eyes is one of the best looking cars, and one I've nearly bought a few times in the past but never quite got around to. In coupe and saloon form, from the late 90s into the noughties, it really was a halo car of the tuning and modifying car generation. It even looks lowered from the factory, riding in this coupe sport form. Now, although the E36 and BMWs in general, but kind of stemming from this era, are very much known for their 6-cylinder engines, those creamy straight sixes really are very wonderful. This one though is perhaps the connoisseur's choice. Originally the IS came with the M42 B18 1796 cc 1.8 litre 4-cylinder. They're making 138 horsepower and 175 newton meters of torque. It was a notably tough engine with a forged steel crankshaft and came with tubular stainless steel manifold and lots of other aluminium parts for lightness. This was the basis of the S42 race engine because it was notably tough and easy to get lots of performance out of. However, in 1996 until 1999, they moved over to the M44, which is a more refined version of the same thing, which is what we find in this car here, being the 1.9 or 1895cc engine. And there has been a debate raging since 1996 as to which is the better engine, the tougher M42 or the more refined M44. It's an interesting period of engine bays. It's starting to become modern and plastic shrouded, but there's still lots of engine you can actually see and be interested in. It still has a cable throttle, which is a good thing in my book. And we can see here on this label, this car, this lovely light metallic blue colour, is more, I can't pronounce this, Morigrün metallic. I don't speak good German. Right, climbing into the 318 IS, pull the handle and the glass drops a touch, then you can climb in. Long door, being a coupe. A lot of slightly soft touch plastic along the top and the basic frame of the thing. We've got a padded fabric area in the centre, which also contains a plastic door handle, our wee nubbin for the electric mirrors, a very long door pocket and a second door pocket for the rear seat passenger to use in the back of the door, and a wee tweeter down here, or a very small speaker at any rate. Looking at the seat before I climb into it, first of all, you can tell it's the 90s by just looking at this fabric. There's a whole art movement around these kind of raggedy, artworky, ethnic-y drawings, Aztec and Inca kind of influenced. It is fabric, that's not uncommon for the era, and the multi-way adjustment is all these typical handles on the side of the seat. Let's climb in because it's raining. Now this is Very much BMW at its best on this dashboard. In terms of T-shelfery, it's something of a 2 out of 10. We have a small tray on the left-hand side, which is sloped heavily, but it is lipped, so we can put things in there. If you had a lot of gobstoppers, this would probably work quite well, because you could put them in there and they would just stay in this small tray area. However, for a cup of tea, it's a large fail, I'm afraid. Now, moving back to the main driver area, this is ultimate driving machine territory. We have everything focused and curved back towards the driver. So our big instrument binnacle in the center, big speedo, big rev counter, a digital area in the bottom, and our swingometer of fuel usage, which is a favorite of 90s and noughties BMWs in so many cars right up until, well, the late 2010s, I think. E60, I think, still had it. Temperature gauge, fuel gauge, and a few lights. That's a lot. And it's all in a nice arcing, curving, round area just there. Now, to the right of that, we have got moulded into the shape of this sticky outy binnacle bit, our air vent and front and rear fogs and typical BMW rotating light switch. Hidden behind that, barely noticeable, is an extra vent to blow air onto the window. Keep our ventilation good, we like good ventilation. Then over to the left, we have a larger version of the same thing, giving us our full ventage to the driver from the left-hand side. This is switchable on and off and rotates in every direction, and it's a lovely curvy thing. This entire binnacle section is protruding from the dashboard forwards and wrapping around towards me in the driving seat. We've got a slightly later Alpine radio here in the centre, which looks very much in place because it's the kind of car that would have had this kind of thing done to it. Then we have our 3 dials of ventilation, looking simple, basic and functional. Beneath that we've got an analogue clock with the little buttons just canted off to the left hand side to make them slightly less visible. A little small cubby just there with a rubber textured bottom, and a larger full-size sort of DIN radio sized cubby at the bottom. Could you get something else to stick in here, I wonder? This is quite a useful size, just big enough to put a phone into. Perfect. There are 5 other blanking switches, so if you had other options in other cars, they would be here. Then you've got your lighter socket, and typical BMW, going back to the E30, we've got our window switches here to the left and right of the gear shifter. On the E30, it was always a common problem that these would stop working because they got gunk in them. You had to go and get some electrical contact cleaner, give them a hose out. Behind the gear shifter, we've got big hazard light warning switch. This is a generation of BMW. Won't be needing that too much because these don't really go wrong too badly, certainly not as much as the later ones do. But moving back to the centerpiece of this whole escapade, fantastic 5-speed manual gearbox, leather knob, pleather gator. It feels really good in your hand, and it's a lovely smooth action that flies through the gearbox. It is really very nice indeed, and an absolutely wonderful thing to have in the car. Now, moving back over to in front of the driver, we have got quite a large steering wheel as it goes. It's having to move the camera right the way back to see all of it in there. It's leather, it's soft, slightly soft touch, but firm enough to get a good grip on it. It's a sporty thing in a 90s kind of way. It's not over sculpted. It looks good. It's got an airbag in it, amazingly, and it's got a horn. Wow, dramatically parpy. We are very impressed with the parp on that. Now, it's a nice steering wheel. I like that a lot. Moving back from there, the gear shifter. We love that gear shifter. We've got a little ashtray with a standy-uppy thing, which someone once told me is for standing a burning cigarette up in vertical, which sounds hugely dangerous. Handbrake, proper manual handbrake, fantastic. Armrest, which lifts up, and then you've got a cubby hole for your tape holders. Wow, that is so cool. Doesn't even have a cassette player in the car anymore, but still has tape holders, which are so cool. This is also a great place to hide your 1990s car phone in there. On the passenger side, we've got more of this amazing Aztec-y inspired fabric, very hard wearing stuff. And the left-hand side, we don't have a passenger airbag, but we do have twin air vents. And we've got a lockable glove box with twin cup holders. Here is our lower deck T-shelf, and another awesome BMW thing, the removable, obviously removable, the rechargeable torch, which lives in the glove box. So in the event of an emergency, you've always got this little fellow just waiting to do your bidding. That's all flock lined and not rattly and nice. Now, looking up above, we have got an electric sunroof. How swank is that? One touch and away it goes. but it is raining, so I'm going to close it again. One touch open, have to hold it to close. I guess that's a safety thing. Well, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Now, climbing in the back here, lift that little lever up and the seat goes forward a little way. Climb in, it's a bit of a duck down for someone of an average adult size. Equipment in the back, nets on the back of the seats, armrest moulded into the side and sort of matching the front doors. We've got the same white fabric, which looks very nice. More of the Aztec stuff. Courtesy lights in the C-posts, grab handles. The ceiling does feel a little bit low in the back here. And it's a little bit, well, it's very tight on my toes. It's actually crushing my toes under the chair, but my knees have got a fairly good amount of space. So it's okay for a little while. My toes really are, I'm basically pinned by the toe. So it's okay for smaller people who haven't got size 11 feet perhaps. We also have a second dash tray for rear smokers. No cup holders, no power outlets, but this is the 90s. In terms of safety, we've got 3 seat belts. The middle one's a lap belt, but the 2 outer ones actually come out of the centre and harness the wrong way round, which is curious. Now around the back of the car, because it's an IS, we have got the spoiler, which looks awesome. These things got taken for so many other modified cars of every other make. These rear lights are kind of iconic in their own way because they, I don't know, they just became the definition of BMW for quite a long time. Proper little saloon boot in there. And it goes back a really long way, so it's like the 4-door saloon. We've got a big boot, although the opening is fairly compact in terms of the space because the lights cut into it a long way, and its rear glass does likewise. So as we saw with things like the Mondeo, a sort of similar time to this, turning that rear end into like a hatchback that looks like a saloon-ish or a coupe-ish works so much better for practicality. We've got some tools down here in this little bay on the right hand side, and under the floor we've got a full-size spare wheel. Oh, thank you BMW. Right, let's get on the road. So, the E36 had massive shoes to fill, and it was never going to be an easy task for this car to replace such an iconic car as the E30. It defined the 80s as much as that the XR3i and the 911 did. However, when the E36 came along, it was also a smash hit. Ultimately, they had to build it all around the world. 3 plants in Germany, America, Mexico, Egypt, Indonesia. Ultimately, they built 2.7 million of all variations of this thing, which is plenty, really. And for a long time, the values of these things have very much been in the shadow of the E30 because it's not the E30, it's not the one everyone wants. But whisper it, it's a better car. I love the E30. I've owned an E30 and I've driven quite a few of them, and I do like them a lot. However, this one, or these cars in general, they feel more modern for a start. They feel lighter on the wheels. The steering doesn't have that whole E30 77 turns lock to lock thing going on, so you can just drift through a corner and be a lot more focused on the drive. It's much more Alfa Romeo-ish in its steering setup, which is absolutely a good thing. The E36 really did grow up a lot in terms of chassis dynamics, as well as being a stiffer shell. Obviously they always are with every new model. They completely reworked the suspension. At the front is McPherson struts, so that's a nice, stable, reliable setup. At the back though, it's got an all new multi-link axle. They call it the Z-Link because it was first used in the Z1 in 1989, and it's a far more advanced setup, gives way more control over the back of the car. So as you whisk down a twisting, turning country lane, the car remains composed and upright, the wheels stay connected to the road, and in general, everything is good. The only version that didn't get that was the Compact, which, because of the smaller platform, used the E30's old, more basic trailing arm setup. E36 was the first 3 Series to get both a 6-speed manual and a 5-speed automatic, as well as the first one to get a 4-cylinder diesel. However, in the IS, it only got a 5-speed manual, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because the power band matches well to the gear ratios, and it is a lovely, slick thing. Having just taken ownership of a daily drive automatic, which people keep telling me I'm going to get used to, 5 minutes in this just reminds you how bad things have become, because this is so much better. It's so involving, so interactive. It's just a joy to snick through that gear shift. It is just a joy to drop the clutch, blip the throttle and go a little bit. Although the E36 was available in a huge range of model versions and engine versions, ranging from a 1.6 petrol up to the M3, which was, you know, the max power car of 2 decades. The engines it's really noted for are, of course, the straight sixes. They are melodious, they are powerful, they are creamy smooth. However, this one has got the M44, which is an iron block with a lightweight aluminium head, and of course lots of other aluminium ancillaries as well. And because a 4-cylinder isn't quite as smooth as a 6-cylinder, in the road cars it's on hydraulic engine mounts to give it just a smoother ride. But it's a rev-happy engine which is tough and durable. Oh, this car is great. It feels so modern and at the same time so old school with its level of interaction and connectedness to the car. You can feel the road through the wheels. The steering is light enough to be pleasant, but not heavy enough to be wearing. I know we haven't got that straight 6 burble. We have got a unique 4-cylinder little rumble going on in front of us. The driving position is, I mean, it's perfect. It really does not get better than this. You're sitting quite low in the car. Your legs are out in front of you a bit, but not uncomfortably so. The seat is multi-way adjustable, and I've very quickly found pretty much exactly the right place to be. These controls, like the typical BMW long metal stalk with a big plastic nodule on the end, which are typical of the era, fall exactly where your fingertips need to be. The steering wheel is big, but at the same time, it's extremely comfortable. And because this wraps around you, this console puts the radio and the heater controls literally at fingertip length away from the steering wheel. Even the gear shift is less than a hand's width from the rim of the wheel, which I'm told is the perfect control layout, everything within a hand's width of the wheel. This car really is a great driver's car, and it's a shame it was so heavily overlooked for so long, because it is absolutely cracking. Now, I said earlier that this is the connoisseur's choice over the M3, and that's because it's less standout, it's less obvious. It's not so much of a shouty thing. An amazing suspension setup, got all the good stuff that makes the car a good driver's car. I mean, obviously we are less powerful than the M3, but day to day that is very usable power you've got indeed. Now I'm looking at this car thinking, it's the same colour as my 145, it's a lot better built than my 145. If I was to maybe move on my 145 and my 200 VI, this would look really good on my drive. It's the same colour even as the Alpha. That'd be great. The only thing is, of course, there's nothing wrong with it and it's not really going to break very much, so it wouldn't give me any content for the channel. Ah, the dilemma of being a YouTuber. You find a perfect car, but if you buy it, it puts you out of work. Ah, this thing absolutely just flows through the bends. It is so much fun. Even on these bad bumpy roads, the car is so controlled, and because it's not got massive wheels with tiny thin rubber band tyres on it, it absorbs the bumps really quite nicely. The acceleration is respectable. It's 10.2 seconds to 60 and the top speed is 138. It's not as fast as some other cars, but it's very engaging when it does it. The thing with this car is it just feels so taut and so grown up, and it's just so modern for a car that's now pushing 30 years old. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this absolutely stunning BMW 318 IS. It is so good. It's a long time since I've driven an E36, and I remember them at the time being a bit of a halo car, but never quite had the, I don't know, that same aura as the E30. But now, having driven both again recently, I have to say that if I was going to drive one of these a lot, the E36 is the car I would be putting my money into. But let me know what you think, and if you've enjoyed this, please, as always, like and subscribe in the thingies below, and join me again next time driving something completely different. Hello, Mr.